want to talk about selecting students for your REU and matching them with projects. There are a lot of different ways to do this. Let's first talk about selecting students. So you've already done your recruitment, now you have a big pile of applications. I typically have anywhere from 80 to 105 for 10-ish positions in mind. I've heard some ratios are even worse than that with some programs, and maybe you have one of those. And then some programs don't receive that many applications. So I do struggle some with how do we select these students out when the top 30 or so would all make great candidates for our program. There are various things to think about. I know Marianne mentioned her rubric and points. Be careful with that one. I was in an administration of higher education class shortly after the Michigan Supreme Court rulings. And do you remember the one was giving a point, some number of points to a minority was not okay. But minorities could be considered. So maybe what she might consider doing is having a checkbox or something so that she knows who her minorities are, but it's not a point system. That was ruled unconstitutional. That might not be how she's implementing it. That's kind of what it sounded like she was doing. But anyway, so that's something to think about. And then I agreed with the other things she talked about with selecting students, so looking at the whole transcript. We do that, absolutely. And in fact, when I took over my REU, I had a senior scientist, this is his term, he was a great white father, and you all get that, right? In our fields, a lot of them, they're all great white fathers who have come before us. Yeah, I see you laughing, good, thank you. By perhaps one of our great white fathers, I don't know. Anyway, he pulled me in his office and showed me his college transcript, and the reason he did that was he had B's and C's in his math classes. But when he hit his meteorology classes that were very math heavy, like dynamics, he had A's. He wanted me to make sure that I wasn't looking at a transcript in, quote, the wrong way, that we were really thinking hard about what was going on in that transcript. And so we do that now. We really look at a transcript. We don't have a GPA minimum, and we're looking at trends of grades, and we're looking at, once they're in their major classes, are they excelling then? You might think that, and this is true for some meteorologists, that when they're in the math classes, math for math's sake is just not that interesting, but when the math means something for the science, it's suddenly really cool. So those are things to think about in selecting your students. And then when we're doing that final selection, we're looking at what are we ending up with, and do we like that balance of students? So are they meeting the goals that we have for REU? You know, it's in the program announcement, we've got things that we have to consider, like the majority of students are coming from schools where research opportunities are limited, and things like that, and the majority are outside of your home institution. So make sure you're considering those things in the end, because some of the big school students will look really great. I had a nastygram on a reference letter once from Penn State, which is, along with OU, it's one of the top programs in meteorology. Who are you selecting for your program if you're not selecting Penn State's best students? So I slept on that for several days and then wrote a letter that I hope went over well. I don't know if you have any institutional history of that, because it happened in the early 2000s, right when I took over the REU in Norman. One of my first things that I had to deal with. I just tried to very gently explain what the purpose of an REU was, and that it was for the schools like ours to bring in the students from smaller institutions. And we do bring in students from Penn State, and we do, so it's just they're not going to be the majority, and that's not the, quote, ideal REU student. That's not what NSF is looking for us to do. And then on matching projects, there are a number of ways to do that, and I'll get you talking here in just a second, I promise. What we had done for many years was the selection committee would reconvene after the students had selected spots in our program, and we would have the applications in front of us, and we would do that pairing. The application included interest areas that they had checked off, so we had some ideas besides an essay of what they were interested in. But lately we have done something else where we've had the mentors submit a paragraph about what the project would be like. And if they want to have any suggested background, they can, but I emphasize to them that you can't all ask for people with experience in programming. That won't work. but one or two of you can, you know. So we'll have a big page of that the students can look at, and then they rank projects, and then I take a look at optimizing that ranking with a little bit of a mind back to their application. And I've only messed that up once, where a student was so clueless about what the project was that she was a really bad match, and I didn't appreciate it. We actually changed her mentor after the first week. But mostly that has gone really well. I know that some programs let mentors come and look at the stack of applications. We've chosen not to do that in my program for a number of reasons. But I'd like to hear, I know several of you have had a program for a little while, so can you share the strategies you are taking to select your students and then match them with projects in order to meet the goals that you have for your program? Who would like to talk first?
I'm relatively new at this. At Penn State, we have a climate REU that's just finished its 4th year, and I'm directing the second cycle, which just started after being a mentor for 3 years. And what we did, and I believe they did something similar the prior years, although it might have been maybe not as prescribed, was we had the mentors write up a paragraph, although sometimes it was just like a sentence, but ideally it was a length of a paragraph, and we actually sent those to the students, I can't remember, several weeks before the program started, and we had more projects than we had students, and then the students basically rated those, and yeah, some of them, you know, everybody wants to work with Mike Mann, you know, the hockey stick guy, but and so you get a lot of positives for that. But basically, we were able to give students their first, second, or sometimes third choice, and that, you know, that seemed to work out fairly.
Daphne, I am sorry that I spoke so loudly into the microphone. I am very curious to know why you decided not to allow the individual advisors to bring in. Our history is such that we began originally with all the advisors coming together and rating and deciding which people would be the best, and then doing a combined listing and ranking, and then we abandoned that and just allowed each individual faculty member, or doesn't have to be faculty, it could be postdocs or others, to provide a project well ahead of time, put it online, and then have the applicants give their first and second choices of whom they wanted to go on. And then the advisors themselves chose, with only a small amount of oversight from the REU site directors. And that has been a very interesting result for us, and it's worked well for a couple of ways. Part of it is it's just fewer meetings, which makes a big difference to a lot of people. But aside from that, sometimes an advisor wants to take a student on because there's a particular scientific goal that needs to be reached during these 10 weeks, and so they will choose an advisee in one way. And then in other years, that same advisor say, I want to nurture somebody who has had no experience before, and I want to bring them along because I have a multi-year idea that I want to get them going on. And it varies from year to year. It gives them the most flexibility. We even had one advisor who is dyslexic, who specifically chose a dyslexic student, saying, I want to share with this student what my experiences are and how it can actually be a gift for the student's research in the future, as opposed to what might be perceived as a disability. So the balkanization of our selection process has turned out well for us. Why did you choose not to do that? That's really interesting to us.
Yeah, well, I inherited this mindset from my predecessors, and we were concerned that our mentor set would not be so amazing as yours. I think that you have a lot of trust. And then how do you make sure you're meeting your program goals then at that point?
The only guidance we give is at the beginning, when we all meet together, the advisors, and we say, okay, here are the NSF's goals for us. This is what we wrote in the program. Please have these in mind as you choose what you want. So everybody, I guess trust is an excellent point, yeah. Everybody, we hope, buys into what we're trying to do with the program, and they contribute in their own way, and we think about it in 3-year and 5-year arcs. Everybody has different needs over the course of a period of time of a research program or an education program. And so everyone buys in eventually. We have had some mistakes, and those do come from individuals who are not sensitive to the needs or are not interested in furthering the overall programs, the site's goals, and those advisors normally we kind of no longer have after a period of time. But it would be good to avoid those things, and so far, fortunately, we've been able to avoid them pretty well.
Okay, well, I'm glad that you brought that up, and I'm glad that it's working well for you. The landscapes change over time, and I could probably do it that way. I just haven't yet. The reason we started to let students choose their projects was for them to have an increased sense of buy-in. And you still have that in yours, yeah. So you've got a two-step. Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to address really quickly how you still meet the goals. We do it exactly the way that you mentioned, but we have two program coordinators, myself and Kathy Reeves, Dr. Kathy Reeves, and we sit in on all of those. One of us mentors a student, the other doesn't, but we also too have administrative veto on several things because we always have one or two that just want nothing but the best of the best of the best. And honestly, I kind of like having a diverse pool, so I don't mind having like one 4.0 from Princeton or something, along with people from community colleges and stuff like that. Right, so you have a nice diverse background, but to meet the program goals of large school, small school, male, female, and diversity, we'll go through, we'll meet, there'll be all these metrics, but if things are going more than one way or the other, we'll talk with an advisor and say, well, this other person seems like a good fit for your research project. Would you consider them? And then they also meet the other goals of the program as a whole. So we have that discussion, but again, you have to have the right mentor set. But also too, you run the program, you control the purse, so you get to veto.
So, sorry. So I'm new at being a PI, but the technique we use is the same one that's been used on past REUs. And the approach that we use this time, and love to hear your feedback, so we create a spreadsheet that has all the students, and then from that, from their research interests, we create separate pages for each mentor that has the students that match their interests. So you'll get, each mentor will get a sheet that has all of the students, but it also has students selected primarily based on the same interest levels. And then from that, the mentors are allowed to rank or pick their preferences. And then once we get that list together, we have a meeting of all the mentors and the coordinators and essentially do together what you all are doing. And then we look at the list, and from that list we try and meet the program goals. And also we also look at that time, because we're trying to develop partnerships between the mentors and the students, we look for connections between PIs or mentors and projects as well.
Yeah, we're down to about a minute, so.
I'll talk fast. I'm new. I haven't selected or recruited students yet, but one of the things I learned about at another meeting I went to was the idea of using, rather than having students check off boxes like paleoecology, where a freshman at a community college might have no idea what that means, is to actually list skills or things that you would be doing as part of that research project. Collecting data from an online resource and typing it into a spreadsheet, or listing things that were more maybe practical but also more approachable for students. I don't know if anyone's tried anything like that or had experiences like that.
It's part of my description as well.
Last one real quick.
So I'm a new PI on, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Okay. I'm a new PI on a program that's been around for a long time. But a couple of years ago, we sort of revamped everything, and part of that was that we went to doing almost everything online now. So we have a website, and the students go to the website, they can read about the different faculty who are available, and there are far more faculty available than we have students, and they can see what the interests are. And then in their written statement, we ask them to highlight those areas of interest and maybe list as many faculty as they want to, but we try to get them to keep it to 3 that they might be interested in working with. And then we have a back-end database where the mentors can go in and they can actually select their name and look at all the students who selected them, but they can also go in and look at anybody else that they want to as well. And then what I have the faculty do, and maybe we're less social because I have a really hard time getting people together like you guys are talking about for a meeting, so I can't get all the mentors to sit down and do this. So we found that this database works well because they can sit in their office and they don't have to be social at all. And they can, so I get this bad view of how we are in Alabama. But we're really kind folks. We just don't like to talk to each other, I guess. But they can sit in their office, they can pick their students, they send me their list ranked, and then I tell them that I need to make sure that there's not overlap and they're not all asking for the same student. But then I use it as the opportunity to do what you were talking about, which is make sure we're meeting all the program goals. And I tell them these goals up front too, so they can think about it when they're selecting students. But I also use that to go through and then get back with them and say, this is the preferred student on your list for you. Are you okay with that? And it sort of allows me to have that hand at forming it, but then they still get to select. And I just make sure that not everybody picks, all the students from R1 schools but I found our faculty are really receptive to following. If I tell them up front what the NSF guidelines are and what we need to do, they've been really amenable to doing that.
There's something I didn't mention about my program that I probably should. The National Weather Center and the Radar Innovation Lab and the South Central Climate Science Center comprise something like 500 potential mentors. Potential. So I don't always have all my projects, and that is also kind of our partly momentum, but partly I don't always have all the projects. And so when we select, we've got my selection committee is a broad spectrum of people from jobs across in our town that have something to do with research, but they're not all fully research jobs. So I bring in people from, say, the Weather Service who do research on the side, things like that. So we're selecting students that we see potential for them to contribute to our fields very broadly, all across our units. And then if we select a student that we don't think we have a good project already lined out for, I will go find people and I'll say, look, I have this fantastic student we want to bring in, would you consider mentoring? And so I'm able to do that because I don't have all the mentors locked in. You can do it either way. And they're
Okay, so I've heard a lot about, asking students about what they were interested in and having them kind of select mentors and stuff. And I guess I got a little bit of an answer to this question from what you said about putting skills on the website. But especially since we tried to get the rising sophomores and rising juniors who, they might think that they're interested in something, but they actually never had a course in that, and they don't really have a clue. So I'm wondering, I'm kind of taking over a program that's been going on, and I know that we have been asking the students what their research interests are, but I'm wondering if there's any other ideas or ways to pair up students without asking them what their research interests are, because they might be wrong about what they think they are.
So now I don't. And I can get away with that. So I'll ask them about what has excited you about your coursework, and I'll get some clues about some of their interests, and Rebecca's nodding, things like that, that'll give us some insights into being able to pair them up or to seek a mentor for a particular student we want to bring in for some reason.
On the source program, I guess I'm just realizing I'm a little dictator. I select the students with a large committee based on the potential of the student to be successful in the field and be excited. We don't even ask them what project they want to work on. We try to get an idea, but we don't put the projects out there. We completely select the cohort first, and then I go and try to find the projects. But I also, kind of what Marianne said, I interview all my finalists over the phone, and I try to get a feeling. And I noticed that my first-year students, academically young students, I often match them with mentors based on personality, based on who I think will benefit working with a certain scientist or engineer here. And I worry less about the actual topic of the research, and I often go by skill. What skills do I think the student would benefit learning? So if the student tells me they've never done programming, that's a reason for me to match them with a mentor in a programming heavy project. So it's a little bit reverse engineering. So I'm noticing that. So it's very cool to hear from all of you because it's kind
Okay.
of opening my mind right now.
Right, yeah, I love it. This is great to see two kind of completely different ways working really well. So my program's got a great reputation if you don't know that. And probably everybody's heard of SOARS. Well, you know, I know you're not in atmospherics. A lot of you are. But, and SOARS has an awesome reputation too. And so our model works and your model works, and that's great.
Okay. And if you have,
I have a question about the phone interview. You phone interview your top 10 or 20 or?
As my finalist list, probably about 25 out of that, I phone interview all of them, and then I bring it down to about 8 or 10 that I bring in. Yes, but it's incredibly generic. I pretty much ask them the same 2 questions that they had to answer in their essays, so I don't want to freak them out. I tell them up front, this is not really an interview, I just want to talk to you. This is not meant to be scary, and I give them all this like pre-thing of, if you think you forgot to mention something in the interview, just email me later. This is not a cutting out selection kind of scary process. I really just want you to have a chance to ask me more questions. So I usually just say, why do you want to come to SOARS? What are you excited about? But then I give them about 15 minutes to ask me questions. And they do ask a lot of questions. How is Boulder? Is it very white? Is it really what I have in my mind, kind of cowboy country? Am I safe there? Like all the stuff that people really worry about. Who would I be working with? Do you have photos of the mentors? Like my students care about something very different. They need to understand what environment they come into. I am gay, will I be safe? I'm transgender, will I be judged? So that kind of conversation we have on.
You stole my transgendered student this year.
okay, let's,
No, SOARS is a big competitor for my REU, but then again, it's not, because it's a more than 1 year thing, and so it's not a competition. It's like, yeah, go to SOARS. If you got in, go, you know.
all right.
I lose students that way.